Your logic may be flawed. You're upset. And when we're upset, I'm going to redo it because
Someone's trying to Grand Theft Auto over there.
we've all been there. Really, guy, come on. Change your tires.
Well, how did he peel out twice?
Welcome to Two Brothers Talking. I'm Israel.
And I'm Eli.
We've all been there. We had a discussion with our boss that we were unhappy with, whether it be a coaching discussion, a performance rating, whatever it may be. We are simply unhappy. This is one of the worst times to look for another job, and I'll tell you why. You're upset. When you're upset, your logic can be flawed. You don't think clearly. We tend to make rash decisions when we're upset. And last season, I talked about a toxic boss who made me consider if the job I had was the right one for me. And I'm so grateful that I took a step back and listened to wise counsel from my dad at the time and stayed where I was. And the reason being was because my logic at the time would have been flawed.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I've known folks who quit their job, sometimes without even having a backup job ready, completely based on emotion. And that's either because, a manager was upset with them or they got upset with their boss. They had a difficult decision or they had a difficult conversation. Anytime you make a huge life-changing decision based on emotions, chances are whatever you do is going to end up differently than you planned. Now, you have to understand really what a job is. Yeah. You are trading work for money. And for a lot of folks, they live off that paycheck, right? That's why we go to work. If my company stopped paying me for the work I would do, I would quickly find employment elsewhere. So if you're relying on that job, one of the worst things you can do, and really one of the least productive things you can do, is I'm upset with my boss. Therefore, I'm leaving. And I've been there. I've had bad bosses. I've had good bosses. I've had bad bosses, and I've had badder bosses whose idea of exerting authority was to yell at me for no reason. And having been there, I can say, there are difficult times in work, but you have to understand that you don't want to give up something good because of a bad day. And you never, ever want to think with your emotions. A lot of times we hear, I'm leaving that place because all of these XYZ reasons. And just because you can justify something doesn't always mean it's the right decision.
So I think that's a really good point. And one that goes hand in hand is reason number 2. You feel that you've been branded and stranded. And we've used this term a lot in season 1. And simply it means that you've been given a label or someone has a perception of you, whether it be a leadership team or an individual leader. And that label does not change regardless of how much you change. Yeah. And that is a tough place to be. I can imagine we've both been in this position. And I remember being in this position and having a discussion. I applied for a promotion, a leadership promotion, 7 times over the course of 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And it was not because of my lack of qualifications. In fact, the senior manager that I was having a discussion with told me that. They said, Israel, it's not because you're not qualified. It's because of our perception of you. And I said, okay, interesting. I'm open to hearing people's perceptions because sometimes we play a part in that. Other times it's simply their perception and that's become their reality.
Yeah.
And so I was eager to hear because I'm like, if this is what's stopping me from getting this job, like I'm all ears. Tell me, I want to change. And so the feedback I was given was, you're cold, you're unapproachable, and you're arrogant. And I said, okay, I can appreciate that. Can you give me some examples? And an example I was given was, well, a while back, you were invited to a leadership outing. I wasn't a leader by role, but by design. I worked closely with leaders. So I was given an invitation to it. So I went. However, I didn't know too many of the leaders there on an individual level. Like I didn't have a personal relationship with the majority of them. But I see a job as you go do your job and you do it to your best of your abilities. And if you can have great working relationships, by all means, make those and keep those and build upon those. But I don't go to work to make friends. That's not my intent.
It's a nice plus.
Yeah.
But that's not why I'm here.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I said, okay, I can appreciate that perception because I wasn't really as talkative or engaging in that conversation because it was offensive to me. The discussion they were having was not work appropriate. And granted, we were at a outing, but we were still at a work function. So I wasn't judging them, but I just didn't want to take part in that. And because of that decision that I made to stand by what I felt were strong principles and beliefs, I was being knocked for that. And so I said, okay, well, I can't control that, and I'm not going to change my standards or my beliefs or even my principles that I have outlined for myself. But what I can change is how willing I am to cross over, to reach across the aisle per se. It's not politics, but reach across and say, you know what? I might not have a great working relationship with you or even a personal relationship, but I'm going to go out of my way to try to build some type of professional relationship, whether it be finding out when their birthday is and going by and saying, hey, happy birthday, by the way, getting them a card, trying to build some type of relationship outside of a business transaction. And in doing so, and I did that, and I don't want to get into the tips here, but taking that approach to it versus jumping ship, because I'll tell you, once I found out that it was a perception that I did not get this promotion 7 times over, I was upset.
Yeah.
And I was really upset. And at that point, I had a discussion with my wife and I said, you know what? I don't see a future here in this company if that's the way it's going to be. And of course, because she's a great partner for me, she's willing to tell me what I don't want to hear, but what I need to hear. And she said, Israel, you might not be those things, but to them, that's how you're coming across. So can take a step back and evaluate what is true, what isn't, and what you can control, and go from there. And I think that's really where you have to be willing to do that versus taking the easy way out, because it's easy. You can find another job, especially if you're a well-qualified candidate. It's easy to find another job. But is it the right time to leave the job you're in or the right moment because you're upset?
Yeah. And being branded and stranded, that's a difficult place to be to begin with, because your brand may be earned, whether it's by, on purpose or not. It may be an earned brand.
Yeah.
Or in some cases, it has very little to do with you. It could just be because, to your point, their perception of you is going to be warped by their own, whatever's going on inside of them. And I've had people who I was a facilitator for a number of years, and I would spend much of my time in a classroom.
Yeah.
I had people who would come into my classroom and they'd be like, "Oh man, this guy's stuffy. He's this and he's that." And then 5 minutes into the classroom, just like it completely breaks because their perception of me changed. We have to understand that a lot of people's perceptions, if you spend very little time around them, is going to be based off of whatever they're carrying, whatever luggage they're bringing to the table. It's almost like seeing through rose-tinted glasses, except maybe it's like dirt-colored glasses. Because they're going to see only what they want to see or what they perceive of you, which can sometimes be negative. And we have to understand that, we have, yes, a responsibility in others' perception of us, but to your point, we want to control the controllables. And at no point in controlling the controllables do we want to sacrifice our integrity or our character. I am never going to come to a point where, I want this person to like me, therefore I'm going to compromise who I am. I've lost jobs because I wasn't willing to compromise who I was. And I don't want to get into our tips just yet, but I'm excited for them and I hope you stick around. But you have to understand that being branded and stranded is not the end of the road. There are ways to come out of it. It's going to be work. And a lot of that's going to be in conversation in your day to day. I'm going to save that for tips, but that kind of leads us into our number 3, that you're constantly being told no, or you're hearing a lot of no. Now there are 100 reasons to be told no. Whether it's in relation to a raise, whether it's in relation to a promotion or a job offer. I've gotten no's in my years. Lord knows I've gotten some no's. But this ties back to, I think, number 1, where you don't want to make this decision based on emotions. If I get told no for a promotion, I don't want that to be the reason I jump ship. A lot of times it's very premature. Now, understanding that each of these things is going to be case by case. You may have a perception of, I got passed up on this job or this raise because X, Y, Z, and that's why I got told no. But I think one very important thing that our employer does is they provide feedback as to why. And you didn't get this raise because, you didn't get this job because, And there were two different instances recently with my employer where I applied for two jobs that I felt I was qualified for, one after the other, not at the same time. That'd be awkward. But I applied for a job. I felt I was qualified.
Right.
I didn't get it. And I had a choice to make. I was either going to be butthurt about it, or I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to keep being the best, XYZ, insert your role here that I can be, and keep moving on. It turns out a couple months later, they approached me and said, hey, you still interested in this job?
Yeah.
Because the person we had left. And so I wasn't not on the table. They just chose someone else over me based on whatever they brought to the table. The second time, I applied for a job I had in essence been doing for about 1.5 years. And I felt, yes, I'm super qualified. And they ended up giving it to someone else who'd never done the job before, didn't even work in the same department as me. And if I'm honest, I was offended. I was upset.
Me too.
And I didn't like it. And the emotions ran high for a minute, but I realized, you know what, either, and with our faith, I'm like, hey, it just means God has something else.
There's something else.
There's something else down the road. And I just kind of had to understand that my job was more important than my emotions in that moment. My job was more important than just getting told no. And realistically, we have to understand that a lot of your character is brought to the front when you're told no.
Yes.
You really learn a lot about someone's character and the strength of their character when you tell them no.
Yeah.
Because how they respond is very indicative of what's going on in their heart. If they just explode and can't control anything, that's an indication of what the kind of leader they would be.
Right.
Or what kind of, person they would be under pressure. And at the end of the day, I still got the job because that other person left for some reason. I promise I'm not like part of the mob chasing these people out of town.
You got the job. They disappeared.
Right. They woke up in Mexico tied to a radiator. But you have to understand that your character comes forth when you're told no.
Yeah.
And the last thing you want to portray from your character is I got told no, so I went through a fit. Or I got told no, I didn't get what I wanted, so I
quit.
I dipped. And that just shows all those people who were maybe rooting for you that maybe my character or maybe the character of that person isn't where I thought it was.
Or even rooting against you, like showing them that they were right.
Yeah. Like, oh, I told you they were a baby. You told them no, and they threw a fit and they quit. And I've had people do that. We've worked with people that, people come through my classroom and, they were strong. They were good. They asked for one thing. They didn't get that one thing and they'd quit. And we had already invested, thousands of dollars into the training.
A lot of money to bring on someone new.
It's a ton. And then 5 weeks, basically very close relationship with me trying to build them and educate them and develop their skills. And because they didn't get the first shift they wanted, or because they didn't get the leader they wanted, they would quit. And I just saw that as such a disappointment. I wasn't upset. I wasn't, I wasn't angry with them. I was just so disappointed because I expected more.
I think I've heard a quote, and I don't even remember where I heard this, or even if I'm just making it up on the spot, it's possible. You want to know what a man's made of, tell him no.
Yeah.
Because, of course, that's where their character is going to come out.
Yep.
I remember the other day, I don't know why I did this. I just was curious. I've been with the company that we work at for close to 8 years now.
Yeah. I've
applied for 42 different positions.
Whew.
And I've gotten no's for 37 of them.
Goodness.
37 no's. And I don't apply for something unless I'm qualified. Like, that's not what I'm not here. Oh, just apply for everything.
CEO day one.
I mean, hey, I look at the qualifications. I look at my current qualifications. I see where I can add value, because that's what I want to do at the end of the day, is just add value. And so I was probably top contender in the majority of these from the feedback that I've gotten, but it was still a no. And there was those jobs where you're like, you prayed about it and you felt this really good. And you're like, okay, I've gotten through like all 3 interviews and I'm at the final stages. And then you get a phone call, or what's worse for me is the email, because you see it come across and you're like, oh my gosh, here it is. They want to schedule a follow-up. And then it's no. And all those times, it's hard. It's hard to, you know what? I'm going to do my best regardless of how upset I am right now.
Yep.
That's really difficult. And we're going to give you 3 tips to make sure that you make the right decision at the right time for you, so you can not only be the best candidate available, but also increase your earning potential by being patient and actually thinking things out. The first step in developing yourself into a candidate that's both competitive and allowing your career to have longevity is to identify your weak spots. And in order to do that, you have to take a step back and be honest. And the best way to get feedback is to solicit it, right? You go back to your circle of friends, and we talk about this all the time. You got to get a group of people that you can trust, that you have
good support system.
Yes, that can support you, that can challenge you, that can encourage you, but also give you candid feedback when necessary. So go to them. Go to your leadership team, whoever that may be. Go to people that may not like you, and also go to some peers. Get feedback from all those different sources, and then wait for that feedback to come in. Once it comes in, start to compile that and start to look at it and start to identify the commonalities between the group that is in your corner 100% of the time and maybe not so much, and the folks that are your leadership team, so they see you in your workplace, and also your peers who are working alongside you. Once you get that feedback, you need to have some honest conversation with yourself. And I think you need to do some self-reflection. I talked about it a little earlier. I had that feedback from the senior manager.
Yeah.
And I went to my wife and I say, hey, this is what they're saying. She knows me better than anybody. She's seen me at my worst and she's seen me at my best. And so she's going to be honest with me. So get that feedback and go to a place of honesty where you're not going to hear what you want to hear, but you're going to hear what you need to hear, and start to reflect on that and start to pick out the ones that align with the person that you want to become.
Yeah.
And the person that you don't want to be. Because those two stark contrasts are important. What you need to do is, even if you need to get a whiteboard, get some sticky notes, whatever way you learn, start to piece together those two lists. And I'll tell you what, the list that aligns to your values and your principles and the person that you want to be, that's what you want to go after. That's what you want to surround yourself with in terms of people, learning lessons, whatever it is, run towards that. Now, the other list, the list of the characteristics and the things that you just don't want to be known for, the character traits that you just despise and you abhor, run from that. And I think it's really important to separate those two for yourself, because you need to know what your brand is. And we'll get into what a brand is here shortly. But the first thing you need to do is get some honest feedback.
Absolutely. And that can be a very uncomfortable thing, getting that kind of feedback,
Yes.
being exposed to your weaknesses. A lot of us don't like to be told, hey, you come across as arrogant, or you come across as stuffy, you come across as kind of like a know-it-all.
Yeah.
It can be, well, it's not something we enjoy.
It's a gut punch.
Yeah, it's a gut punch. It's a what's that over there, and then you get hit in the back of the head. But it's one of those things that's necessary if we're gonna get better. One of the best things we can do is, hey, what do you see that I may not recognize? Whether it's something we agree with or not, we have to understand that that's feedback that we need. And I agree with you. Get it from a reputable and trusted source. Don't just get it from just your best friends who will always tell you what you want to hear, or and this is kind of a challenging thing sometimes. Don't go to people that you will tell you what you want to hear. Go to people who may challenge you. Go to people, I don't like going to that person because they tell me. No, go to that person.
Yeah.
A lot of times the one we're so hesitant to go to, and again, hesitant for good reasons, not hesitant because, well, I'm not going to go to that, some random guy at a gas station because he knows nothing about me, but I'm going to go to those people who really know me. Because to your point, like they might gut check us a little bit and be like, you know what? And they're like, oh man, I didn't realize that, or I didn't see that's how I came across. That wasn't my intention. But it's a necessary step. And we have to understand that, changing yourself, I always liken it to like heating metal. If you're making a change to yourself, it's like metalworking. And if you don't know anything about metalworking, it requires a lot of heat. It requires a lot of heat. And what that heat does is it makes all the particles really agitated and able to be moving around. And then you hit it with something really heavy and really hard. You hit that metal with a hammer, and that's not comfortable being hit with hammers. It's not comfortable being hot. But what that does is it gets out the impurities. It gets out the weaknesses, and it makes it take a stronger shape. So when you're going through this time of receiving feedback, understand it's not supposed to be comfortable and it's not supposed to be easy. But what you're doing is you're making yourself stronger moving forward, and you're getting out those impurities. You're banging out all those weaknesses. And at the end, you're going to be a lot stronger. You're going to be a lot better if you apply that feedback. Now, if I get all that feedback and I just say, no, you guys don't know me, or no, you guys are wrong.
Yeah.
Well, then there's not a whole lot we can do with that. It's very difficult to help someone who refuses to take the assistance. It's almost like someone who's drowning and you throw them a life preserver. If they can't admit they're drowning, they're not going to make it out of the water. And if we're coming to this point, hopefully, if you guys are listening to this, you're willing to admit, I'm taking on some water. So our next step is to say, you know what, I'm drowning. I need to grab on that life preserver. I need to grab on that feedback and put it into action. Building or rebuilding something as complex as a personal or professional brand, it takes time and deliberate action. A brand isn't something that you're typically going to build in a day.
Right.
A lot of us, we think a brand is something you do with one big grandiose gesture, because that's what we're taught in the movies, right? Yeah. I save the day once. I'm a hero for the rest of my life. When realistically, what you know about people is what they do every single day. I used to go to Starbucks a lot when I worked in hospitality because there was one in the parking lot. So I would walk in, and it was kind of funny because at the time, I was with my wife and we were going into the Starbucks, and it happened to be every staff member was a girl or woman. And I walked in and they all, said, "Hey, Eli." And my wife kind of looked at me like quizzically, like, "How often do you come in here?" And it was because I went in there day to day, not because of one big trip where I went and spent a lot of money. Your brand is something that's going to take time and deliberate effort. Yeah. Now, you may have to also address some misunderstandings, and that's going to be part of that deliberate effort, where in cases where people have a certain perception of me, I may have to go talk to those people and say, "Hey, my understanding of your perception of me is this. Is that accurate?" And if it is, maybe ask, how did I come across that way? Or what did I say to make you think that? Because I want to change those things. And I'll give you an example. When I was a substitute teacher, I had my first class ever I was with for a week. I was the same teacher's replacement for a week. And at the end of that week, I had some bad feedback. Or not bad feedback that I wasn't as good as I wanted to be. And so I approached the teacher, I think a couple weeks later when I went back to the same school, and I sat her down and I asked her, "Hey, I received this feedback and I wanted you to know I want to get better. What could I have done better?" And at the time she was kind of flabbergasted, because here's this, at the time I was 19, 20. Here's this young kid trying to make himself better at a arguably difficult profession. And so she gave me feedback. It wasn't sugar-coated. It was right between the eyes. She says, "You could have done this, 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 and this. And these things are ways that I knew that you didn't do a good job." So I put those things into action right away, and I rebuilt my brand to where anytime she took time off, guess who she called? This guy. Because I rebuilt my brand in her eyes.
Because you brought Starbucks.
Because I brought Starbucks. But the rebuilding a brand is never going to be a quick fix. It's not going to be an overnight thing. So the one thing I can say about rebuilding brands is invest the time and don't take shortcuts. And I think that really has to go through a lot of professional things. Don't take shortcuts. You do not want to be known as the guy who takes and time and cuts corners. You want to put in the time. You want to put in the work day to day, which is a lot. It's difficult for, I think, our generation. We're the microwave generation. We want everything now. We want to do one thing and then it be done. And that's just not how professional brands work. Yeah.
And building a strong brand. And the reason why we're talking about this is because it's so important to career longevity. Just think about the brands that you purchase from on a day-to-day basis, and then think about why you do it. Now, some cases it might just be convenient. Starbucks was right there. But others, we continue to go to, we take our family there, we buy our groceries there, whatever it might be. We buy from them. We buy their product because they're reliable, they're credible, whether it be ethically sourced or of high quality, whatever that may be. Branding is so important that they've taken time to craft a brand that you buy from. Branding is just as important in your professional career as it is in the consumer market. So how do you build, or in my case, as I was sharing, rebuild your brand? The first step we already talked about, that solicit that feedback, right? Do that self-reflection and identify what areas you're missing, what areas you're lacking, and what areas you can grow in. And be honest with yourself and put together a strong brand that's going to be fueled by your passions, your ethics, your morals, your principles, whatever you want to be known for. Begin to shape that and then be that. What I mean by be that is, if you want to be known for being reliable, show up on time. Show up every day. If you want to be known for credible, then triple check your sources. Don't just say the first thing that comes to mind. Think before you speak. If you want to be known for trustworthy, then don't lie. When you make a mistake, be honest, own up to it. That's how you build or rebuild a brand that you want to be known for as long as you're in the workplace.
Absolutely.
Now, lastly, our third recommendation is to market yourself. You've put in the effort to get that feedback, to identify your weak spots. You put in the effort to rebuild or build a new brand. Now market yourself. Just like you see commercials with, I think it was Fry's, they've rebranded and they've got these little characters. I think they're really cute. And they have them shopping around, and right now they've got that Low song, and every time it comes on, my daughter just starts dancing because she's like really excited for it. It's catchy and you remember it. It doesn't leave your mind. You want to be known for a candidate that leadership remembers. They don't forget you. Even if they tell you no for a position, you want them to recall and say, you know what? Eli interviewed for this one. It wasn't a good fit. It wasn't good timing, but there's something else. Or the candidate we picked just didn't work out. Eli, he was a contender. He was someone that I really wanted, but this person logistically just fit better, whatever the case may be. I'm going to go with Eli. And so you want to be known for that. So you have to market yourself. And this part is hard because it can come across as peacocking.
It can.
And that part is difficult. It was really difficult for me because I'm not one to want to be out there in front and center and look at me. And you can tell those people in the workplace that they're peacocking constantly and they're always in front of the boss and they're always dancing is what we call it. But you also know that there's no substance there. Mm-hmm. And so that's the difference. You have something to offer, something of substance, something of quality, because you've built a brand based on principles and values and ethics. So you're not in it for just that promotion. You're in it to add value where you can. And if it's just not that time, it's just not that fit, then evidently you couldn't add value there. So why do you want to be in a place that you can't add value?
Yeah.
And so that's important to know. When you market yourself, do it for the right reasons. Do it because you want to add value and contribute everything you can to the organization that hired you.
And I've seen so many folks come into the company we work for since I was part of the hiring process. And spending time with new hires and training, I've seen the people who right away just set themselves apart and the ones who didn't.
Yeah.
The ones who just showed up for paycheck, wanted to do the bare minimum, and then go home at the end of the day. And that's fine. If your job goal is to show up, put in your 40 hours, go home, there's nothing wrong with that.
That's okay.
But if you want that career longevity, if you want to look for promotions, you want to look for recommendations, for raises, you have to have what I like to call the winning combination of traits. And the good thing is all these traits can be something you can adopt.
Yeah.
You're not born with these things. They're typically taught. You apply them to yourself. But the people who I would see come in and the kind of people that leadership would look for, even in training, is the people who showed up every day. Yep. And I'm not saying just came to work, but they showed up. And you've probably had someone like this working with you. They're the kind of people who, yes, they may not be a morning person, but they still put in the effort.
Yeah.
They don't allow excuses to hold them back. They're not looking for an excuse as to why they can't give 110%. They're just willing to have a good day, even if they have reasons not to. They're the people who, to your point, show up on time. If you're not there, it doesn't matter how good you are. An airbag is a fantastic thing if it's in your car. If I get in an accident, my airbag goes off at home, it does me no good.
Yeah.
So you need to be there and you need to show up. You also need to be willing to make calculated decisions and take risks. You know, and the reason I say calculated decisions is there's a difference between taking a risk and taking a calculated risk.
Yes.
Taking a risk would be, I'm going to go, put $1 million on penny slots and just hope I make my money back. That's a risk. Taking a calculated risk is, you know what? I hear that Amazon's going to be a really cool company. I want to invest money in there. I might lose some money, but I might make some money. Right. And again, it's calculated. I'm not putting my whole, own all the money I have in the world. I don't have $1 million, but all the money I have in the world into this one stock and just, hoping it gets there.
Yep.
So you want to take calculated risks. You want to be willing to help and invest in others. And, even if the only thing you bring to the table is encouragement, that can be a powerful thing.
Yep.
We have your wife for a long time has been known as just the most encouraging and smiling person for the longest time. And it drove some people nuts at work. And you know what? They loved her for it. They would tease her a little bit, but they loved it.
Yeah.
If she wouldn't show up smiling and happy, it brought their day down.
Yeah, it did.
And you have to understand that the people who have that career longevity, they have that as their brand.
Yeah.
They don't just come to work to do the bare minimum. And if that is our approach, we can't really expect to be set apart from the herd, so to speak. You really look out for those who set themselves apart in the right way. And the reason I say in the right way is because you've probably heard the phrase, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. The squeaky wheel also doesn't get the promotion, just because the squeaky wheel is always a problem. If I can't trust you with the role you're in now, I'm not going to trust you with more. And I've had employees who worked for me in hospitality, and they would come to me and they say, hey, I would like to, get a raise. And I would say, okay, let's review your performance. So we'd go over their performance, and turns out they're not doing half their job. And they would say, well, it's just too hard. You don't understand. You've never done this before. And then I would kindly smile and tell them that not only have I done your job, I've covered for one of your employees while they were on paid time off while I was doing my job. And I still got it all done. And not to pat myself on the back, but to tell them your job's expectations were put there on purpose.
Yeah.
And you asking for a raise while still not even accomplishing your bare minimum, that's not going to put you in a good light. And if we think we're sliding things underneath the noses of our bosses, everyone thinks they're the most sly person in the room, but most of us aren't, if we're honest. None of us are as good a liars as we think we are. Hopefully you're not lying at all. But, we try to sneak things by people. We always think our parents were born yesterday and our bosses are the same. They don't see this coming. They were there at once too. Chances are they did it before you did, and they did it better. So we really have to make sure to set ourselves apart for the right reasons, and have that consistent brand building. And all that's going to come from just being willing to be stretched, adapt, make sure that you are getting the right things forward, I think, to get that career longevity set in place.
Well, thank you for joining us this episode. If you want more tips for how to market yourself, how to build a brand, make sure to reach out to us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Also, if this added value to your life, subscribe, share with your family and friends.